Welcome back to Learning from Friends. I'm your host, Cade Curtis, your tour guide, as I like to say from time to time, with Learning from Friends. And we are going to pick back up on part 2 from speaking with my friend John about his journey of being in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s up till today, about his being a professional percussionist. And so before we get into that, my lovely segment of my mom sending quotes and adding into the podcast is today's quote comes from Bryn Brown. The quote goes, "If you want to make a difference, the next time you see someone being cruel to another human being, take it personally. Take it personally because it is personal." I like that quote, Mom. That was a really good one to kind of add in today for the episode. Well, John, welcome back to the podcast for part 2.
Well, I'm happy to be here again.
Yeah. So where we left off at last time was garage bands. Can you remind us real quick about where the definition from garage bands came from?
Yeah, it's almost common sense when you say garage bands, but in the West Coast, especially in Southern California, most I would say 99% of all the homes were built on slabs, which means there are no basements, probably because of the sandy soil. Who knows why? So when a band wanted to rehearse, they were in a garage. And of course, being in a garage, that brought a lot of neighbors' concerns, and it brought a lot of police all the time, especially around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. They would come and say, "Guys, you got to close it down. You're really loud. Neighbors are getting crazy. We're getting calls."
We got kids that are trying to go to sleep, and parents are aggravated.
Yeah, well, but that's where the term garage bands came from.
So you saw a need here in the community. What did you do to respond to that?
Well, okay, we could say the community, other musicians, but I think it was more of a selfish reason. Again, I'm a drummer. It's not like a guitar where a guitarist could have an acoustic guitar and play in his bedroom and work out songs and write music. I mean, really, think about it. A drummer's going to be loud no matter what. They had practice pads like they have now, and they did have some kind of, I think Remo had a practice pad set, but it wasn't the same. That was just to exercise, to do your rudiments, keep yourself straight. So again, the little solution that I came up with was probably more selfish than anything else because I was a drummer. My good friend's brother owned a building on Broadway in Santa Ana.
Nice.
And it was called the Santora Building. And I believe it was the Hall of Records. I don't think it was a city hall, but it's where they kept all the records. And we went to visit his brother, and he told me that he had a basement that the city of Santa Ana would keep their records down, and it was fireproof. And
Sweet.
They had 13 rooms downstairs. And I said, "Really?" And right off the bat, I thought, rehearsal studios.
Aha.
I mean, really? You could play 24/7 and no one's going to bother you.
Yeah, being fireproof, the sound is not going to get out.
No.
It's not going to go anywhere.
Well, you could hear it upstairs a little bit, but not enough to bother anyone.
That's good.
It's more like a bassy muffle sound. Well, we're getting way too far ahead. So his brother and I met up, and he took me down into the basement and showed me all these rooms. And I said, "Why are these walls so thick with these huge steel doors?" And he said, "Oh, they're fireproof. This is where we used to keep the records." So he said, "My brother tells me that you have an idea." And I said, "Yes, I would like to lease this whole basement from you and turn these into practice studios." He said, they're about 800 square feet apiece. He said, "But I have one that's 1,500 square feet."
Wow.
And I said to myself right off the bat, "Oh my gosh, I could build a stage and put a sound system in and lighting, and bands could come in and actually tighten up. It'd be like a small
concert
club.
venue, like a little club.
Yeah.
What year was this?
Oh, this was 1976 mainly.
Okay.
Maybe a little earlier. Get this old, things start all blurring together.
But the nice thing is it's in that mid-70s range where you're seeing this transition and you're seeing the opportunity because the musicians need that space, and you're saying, "Hey, I can bring this in and be able to make a little bit of money at the same time, is to be able to contribute to the community of the musicians that needed it.
Yep. But still, I'm in selfish mode.
Oh yeah,
I'm
that's
thinking,
an
oh my
entrepreneur.
gosh, I can actually play my drums any time of the day and just beat the snot out of them, and no one's going to say anything to me. Well, we went down, but like I said, and we went through, and he gave me a price that would cost. It was really cheap. I think it was somewhere ridiculous, like 10 cents a square foot.
Wow.
For the first 2 years. And then the third year, he would bring it up to, I want to say 25 cents a square foot. And then in the fourth and fifth year, he wanted 65 cents a square foot, but that's where we bring it. And so he just wanted to help me because this was dead space to him.
Make some money. Yeah.
Yeah. So I took a space for myself and brought our band in there, and we played. And they said that it was just loud enough to where it did disturb some of the tenants upstairs. So we put a time that we could, after 5, and we could play until 8 in the morning. So
so you had all night. That's amazing.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, people getting off of work at that time, they're still playing in a band or something like that at night. That's a lot of that good time frame for people to come in.
Well, he gave me the first 3 months free, 90 days free.
Man, so that's a win.
Because I didn't have the money. But I thought, okay, we're going to run an ad, and we're going to say, are you tired of being hassled by the police for loud music in your garage? Well, I've got a perfect solution. Basement Studios in Santa Ana.
And you had 12 spaces total. You took one, and then you started to build that center area kind of stage. So you had really 10 spaces for bands.
Actually, it worked out to be 9 that we would actually rent.
So those 3 months that you had it, did you start renovating, tearing things out, building the building up, or did you do that as you were making money and going along?
Yeah, we did that as we made the money. So at first we just rented them just like they were. You know, we did clean everything.
Yeah. You got to make sure that they have space for it.
Right.
Was part of your deal, do you get electricity and stuff in that deal, or did you have to pay extra? Because a lot of ampage and stuff comes out of these equipment.
Right. And you know what? It didn't really cost us a lot of money, but we had a meter put in every studio that was leased. They had their own meter. They had to get their electricity turned on.
So they had their own individual space.
Yeah.
They had to get their meter.
I mean, it was a nightmare the first probably 6 or 7 months when all the electricity was on one meter.
Oh gosh, I can imagine.
I mean, they had enough amperage, but it was the bills. We didn't know
how to evenly space it out with people.
Yeah. So
how did you have those contracts set up with them for if they were leasing? Did you go month by month, or did they have to lease like a whole year?
Yeah, as far as leasing, I might have been young, but I had this all worked out in my head before we even opened to the public. We did put an ad in the paper. It was the Orange County Register. And I remember I wanted to put it in a penny saver because it was free. But the Orange County Register, they said, no, you should put it in the Register. That's a big paper. It gets everywhere. And we didn't know that we were going to have the response that we got. I mean, the ad was only in for the first 2 days, and we had 30 or 40 people.
Nice.
Already leaving messages wanted to come in. They wanted their band. And I said, oh my gosh, okay. I knew this was going to be a good thing, but I didn't know it was going to be this big. But I had it worked out in my head how I wanted to do this whole studio thing. So we started holding interviews, and at first we weren't picky.
Okay.
If they came up with the money, first and last, then we let them in. The first 4 or 5 months was a learning experience.
Yeah,
it was
with
to
all
the point
businesses.
where there was a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, a lot of partying, and the local police came to visit me and said, look, this is what we're seeing. So I said, all right, give me a month, give me 2 months, let me clean this mess up. So we started to interview each band. We had this contract that they would have to sign that there would be no alcohol, no drugs whatsoever, that the Santa Ana police had all rights to come and check when they had keys to the building. They could walk in whenever they wanted to. I wasn't trying to be a commie or anything, but I wanted this to be a really professional thing.
Yes.
It wasn't a place where kids could come and party. By the way, anyone who, they had to have someone over 21 sign a contract with us.
Okay.
So
they could be younger, but they had to have an adult that would sign off kind of in a way?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't care if the drummer or a guitar player was 12 years old. Didn't matter to me as long as I had an adult. Then we got to the point where we actually had a badge each band member would have a badge with their name on it and what studio they were in, what they were renting. And we had, it's funny, we got security. It was an old Hell's Angel. His name was Bear.
Holy moly.
And
That's so
his
cool.
wife was named Sunrise or something weird like that. Anyway, they actually lived on the premises in one of the studios. We made a little apartment.
That is smart.
Yep. And they would walk around and police all night and make sure that people down there, they had either had a visitor badge on or they had a badge with their band name or, studio name on it.
That's smart to be able to keep out people that shouldn't be in there. Easy security of knowing if you didn't have your badge, you're out. And then did you ever have issues with one of the band members forgot their badge or someone didn't have?
Oh yeah, but they signed in. All their names were registered, so it didn't matter. Now, by the way, I don't want to make this sound like it was like an easy transition. This was hard. It took about a year to get it to run like clockwork.
Yeah, with any good business, it takes that time to work out the kinks, get that kind of in place. And y'all made those smart decisions with the badges, hiring security coming in, being connected in with the police so they knew what was going on. Y'all were doing it the right way.
Yep. And it wasn't a well-known thing. We kept this pretty private. After a year, it was word of mouth. So we started to pair up with managers of bands. The manager would come to us, so we didn't even talk to the bands anymore. And
hey, that's good.
The manager would lease it out. And at first it was month to month. And then we went 90 days, 3-month leases. But we never went over 3 months. It was always 3 months.
You never know with a band going to break up pretty quickly, or with the manager all of a sudden turning a band south and being without a band for a month or two. So you want to make sure that you had that space there.
So here I am, a young guy, and we're doing really well. Really well financially.
So after the first year, you said, is that when you started doing some renovations into the building?
Well, within the first 3 months, we started doing reservations. We put carpet in each studio. We put a little refrigerator in so they could keep whatever they wanted in the refrigerator.
Nice.
Did we mind if they had wine or beer? No. But we cared about it overflowing coming out into the hallways or having parties. Did they have parties? From time to time they did. A band would have a party, but they would tell us ahead of time. So we'd had extra security.
Good to have that, that extra. You knew what was happening. You knew it was in place. So you could be able to properly vent it in that sense.
Yeah. The sad thing is it went from a rehearsal space for garage bands to something more professional, which was a good thing. But, the original thought or the original studios were supposed to be just rental spaces for local bands that were tired of being hassled for being loud in your garage. And unfortunately, it got away from the common band and turned really professional. We got to the point where we just, I think I said earlier, where we would just deal with managers of bands. And a lot of them were coming in from other states, other parts of the country. They had jobs here in LA area or the Orange County area, and they just needed a place to tighten up. So they would come in for 2 or 3 months at a time.
Kind of like that moving to that West Coast tour kind of idea. Yeah.
And of course, now back to that one space that we had that was over 1,000 square feet. I think I said it was about 1,200.
Yeah.
We did build a stage. We put a sound system in it. And then we started leasing that out by the hour. And we had and it had to be at least 10 hours minimum to rent it. And bands would come in. We had a lot of professional bands, that were coming in. And the thing is, we had security. People didn't know who was in there, which was good. So it was private.
Yep. Safety.
Yeah.
Did you ever have, I don't know if you're allowed to say it or not, did you ever have any of those names that you want to throw out there that came in to that space?
Yeah. Aerosmith.
Wow.
Came in when they were they were just a young band. And they actually were one of the renters. They had a space for almost 6 months.
Man.
And I just knew them as just regular guys.
Yeah.
And they were fun.
Before the blow up.
Yeah. So they were doing something. I don't even know where Aerosmith is from, where they originated, but I'm not sure. Their manager came to us and
kind of went from there.
Yep.
So you saw that big stage take up, 10 hours that you were able to make a little bit more money in that area. What all did you have in that space? Like what made it feel like a club?
We had tables, little round tables with 2 or 3 chairs that could hold about 20 people in there.
So they were about to invite their own people to come in and sit.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have alcohol or anything, but they, if they brought in their wine, we didn't care. We had a lot of people would bring in their lighting systems. We had a sound booth in the back where we had a clock so that they could time themselves and they could hear what it would really sound like.
So really they could bring in their sound guy to be able to kind of mix things up to see how it sounded.
Did.
They could bring in different amps to be able to kind of set up and see if their rig was set up correctly.
Yep.
And whenever they do that, did you allow them to rent a space afterwards to store equipment, or did you say, hey, you could leave this in here if you're renting this space for multiple days back to back?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. We never leased the space out. Well, sometimes they would. Sometimes would say, hey, listen, we want to lease the space for 2 months or 3 months at a time.
Wow.
And maybe not to keep their stuff there, but to actually rehearse in their own little spaces.
Did y'all ever do anything with setting up recording inside that big space at all, or was it just the little venue itself?
We were getting there, but it never got that far.
It never.
So, which was unfortunate.
Now, did you ever see any musicians come through that where you just thought, oh wow, that's going to be the next big thing, or that's going to be a band that should be somewhere in the area that just didn't lift off that you remember?
Oh yeah, because every one of them that came in were great. I mean, these guys were good bands. So we see, like I said, we missed the point of the whole thing. This was going to be for garage bands.
That developmental kind of
area. And it turned into more professional. So yeah, a lot of the bands that came in were great, and a lot of them didn't make it. You're right. So unfortunately, I mean, as far as now, you have to remember, this is when we get into disco and DJs, because now we're getting into the 76, 77, and DJs are starting to come in, and they're coming in slow. They come in with a carload of 45s.
Oh, the little smaller stuff, and then getting bigger.
I mean, in those days they didn't have. Some of that we had 8 tracks in those days, and cassette wasn't a big deal then. But you'd hire a DJ to come into your party. They'd have a whole carload of records. How can a band compete with that?
That's true.
And I'm not talking about a big venue. I'm talking about weddings, school dances, things like that. I mean, kids wanted to hear what they wanted to hear, and a band would come in and say, well, no, we just play metal, or we just play 50s music. Now how do you compete with a guy who's got a carload of records that can play anything?
And you're hearing that recording, that specific band itself. You're not having to worry about, oh, well, how is this rendition going to be that they're going to play? Is the vocalist, could he be able to handle this lyric in the same way? Yeah, that's definitely challenging.
Yep.
What types of bands did you see coming into your studios? Did you start seeing disco bands come in? Did you start seeing all this other different types of musicians, or was it just hey, this is just a rock kind of genre?
Yeah, it was mostly rock and jazz and blues bands. We didn't have any. By the time disco really came in and got a hand, the studios were gone, unfortunately.
So how long did y'all have those studios for?
5 years.
So you did make it through that 5-year process from going in and out.
Yeah. And I would hear the same thing from all the bands that, wow, the venues that were available now aren't available anymore for a full band. Now they have what they called them disc jockeys in those days. They didn't say DJs until later.
What made it really kind of close the doors? Was it just the money kind of just wasn't making sense anymore?
Why would you give a band $2,000 when you can get a DJ for $600?
That's true.
And people didn't care. All they wanted to do was dance. It was sad. It was really sad because it came really slow, like a cancer, that you said, okay, we can beat this. And then it just ate up the industry. Now that was then.
Now you're seeing this drawing up in Southern California. Did this start affecting other cities as well that you were able to see?
But sure. But at this point, I think one of the best venues that were left was Las Vegas. You could still get a lot of work in Vegas.
So I had almost like today you have the residencies. At that time, before that, I'm sure they weren't really having the major residencies in place. But what kind of venues were around there that you could play in besides the casinos? Or was there anything else besides the casinos?
Yeah, it was mainly just clubs, like that. Yeah. Small venues like in the casinos. Yeah.
Did you
They had a lot of recording too.
Oh, okay.
But I don't want to make it sound so black and white. Like all of a sudden, DJs came in and killed everything. It wasn't that quick. It happened over about a 10-year period. It took about 10 years to really, where you would see a band say, "Oh my gosh, there's nothing out there. We're fighting 8 or 9 other bands for this one job." I mean, it didn't happen really quick. It was slow. Like I said, almost like a cancer. Came in and just ate it up really slow.
So this is for those small bands that were those garage bands that were trying to get their name out there. It affected the bigger bands, but it didn't hit them as hard as that small local band or musicians that were in a region specifically.
Right. If you made it big, if you got one in the top 10, you had a gig. There was no problem. You were going to play. But like you said, right, the typical garage band that made their money on weddings, bar mitzvahs, school dances, all that stuff was drying up. And matter of fact, it probably today it's still dead.
Yeah, it's hard to compete with that DJ. I know I do a lot of auctions, and maybe 1 in 10 auctions, again, this are charity auctions, will have a live band. The rest of them, it is a DJ that's in place. And we have one that we use a lot of the time as well if we don't have something provided. And it does take into that space for that local musician. Right. That can do just fine. And unfortunately, one thing that's majorly happening that I noticed at one of our auctions was they had musicians that had done music videos or done stuff that was pre-recorded from like the Emmys or something, playing that visually in the background. So it felt like a live concert and it looked like the live concert too. And that was really intriguing, but at the same time, it takes away from that local band.
Right.
And that's challenging. Now, during the 70s, there was a lot of recording studios that popped up like constantly to be able to kind of record these bands. Did you ever notice how that affected those individuals that were the smaller bands to be able to, that were losing their jobs in the venues that were still trying to be studio musicians?
Absolutely. I saw a lot of mom and pop studios that were really quality go down. Yeah, it was sad to see it because there was no, they couldn't pay their rent. They weren't getting any clients.
Yeah, whenever you have those managers that are getting snatched up and saying, hey, that we are working solely for the bigger record labels, it does make it challenging for that small mom and pop places to stay in place.
Right. You have more now than you did then. Now that's the thing. The little mom and pop, yep. Recording studios are the big thing today.
Anybody can sit and record something. Right. And be able to auto tune it, fix it up easily. Like I'm able to clean up this episode and other episodes like that really quickly because the tools are available.
Oh, now. I've broken many hearts in my day with bands.
Oh,
well, do you think we should do a demo? And I said, what do you mean? Of course, I knew what they meant, but I wanted them to say it out loud. Well, we could go into a studio and we could record a demo, and I'd say, this is the way it really is. If you have to pay your own money to make a demo, you're probably not going to get it out there.
That's true.
I said, if it doesn't matter. So many times I see these bands, and they're good bands, mm-hmm. and they pay thousands to make a demo tape, and they give it to a promoter to listen to. The promoter doesn't care what it sounds like. It could be scratchy. It could be. You could have an iPhone and record a band. They know what they want. They know what they're looking for. They don't have to have a professional recording to know. They can hear whether a band's going to be good or not, no matter what it sounds like.
In a lot of word of mouth of if they've heard your name before and you're coming up and asking, they know the crowd.
Yeah. Well, they'll come and see you. But
that's true.
You could have an iPhone and say, hey, look, this garage band, you got to hear them. And that's not quality sound from that. But a good ear will say, wow, put these guys in the studio. Let's make a demo. They're going to pay. You don't have to pay out of your pocket.
That makes sense because they're making the investment in you and they already know it's going to be successful at that point to be able to do so. With that, as people are bringing it into the studios and people are coming into the venues, did you ever have, this is going backwards a little bit, did you ever have people coming into your studio, like managers, and just sitting and listening into these rooms, just kind of asking, can I walk your halls? Or can you recommend somebody to me? to record?
Yeah, that's a good question. But, like I said, it never evolved to that because we went within months, we went from garage band to professional bands. So these people were already on their way up. They already had managers, so managers didn't have to come in to sit. I feel ashamed.
Hey, that's okay that you took an idea and expanded to that level and you let it grow. And really, in all honesty, you probably would have never made it that 5 years if you were just sticking to that original routine just because of the way the music industry evolves.
Right.
So businesses are hard to make that decision. I know probably some people saying you sold out, but really you bought in. I love that quote. Yeah, I love that quote. I can't remember what movie it's from.
No, I sold out. I didn't buy in.
Man.
But I want to jump forward and back again.
Oh, go for it.
As far as the recording, paying yourself, in those days, it wouldn't work. You could, I'm not saying it didn't work. I'm sure there were plenty of bands who paid for their own demos and made it. So there has to be. There's always
The exception to the rule.
Yeah, and this is only one drummer's opinion. I'm sure you're going to have people contact you saying, that guy didn't know what he was talking about. But this is the way I saw it.
Yeah, this is your story, your perspective.
Now, today, totally different. Oh yeah, you can pay for your own demo and go out. And I can give an example. And you guys are going to laugh considering that I'm a fusion jazz funk drummer. One of my favorite all-time bands, and I'm not plugging them, this is not a commercial, is a little band from Canada.
Okay.
And it's called Walk Off the Earth. Those guys made it strictly on YouTube, doing their own little things on YouTube. I think you can get their music for free.
Probably
99% of the time. I'm sure you can buy their stuff, but I'm sure they make it by going out and doing concerts because so many people love this band that they'll go and they'll pay and to see them. That's where they're making their money and selling paraphernalia like sweatshirts and coffee cups probably. But yeah, there's a band that put their own money into it. But those musicians, you might listen to the band and say, what? Each one of those musicians is so professional that I can't even put a label on it. Each of them play 4 or 5 different instruments at a professional level.
So that's amazing whenever you can rotate around because, again, it shows up your talent, but also shows that when they're playing together, they know what that musician is going to do next. Like you mentioned previously on the last episode that you know what every instrument was and what it was going to do. So you could be able to follow along correctly and be able to complement that instrument correctly.
Right.
So you threw out a very good comment that I wanted to ask a question on. They're making their money on the tours. They're making their money when they're playing in the venues. What did you notice through your commentary on from making a record, recording it, and trying to make money off the record? How are you really, is the musician making their money? Because of, what is it, like 5-10% that you get a cut off of every record sold, depending upon your contract? Is it the money more in the touring, or really is there some good money in the recording itself?
I'd say in both, but definitely I think touring is where you're going to make your money. Because that's where you sell your stuff too.
Yeah, because your merch is getting out there. You're getting all that.
You have people that's all they do. So yeah, you've got to get out there no matter what. You have to get out there. And of course, it's not like it was 30, 40 years ago. You've got the internet. Today, the internet has made more stars than you can count.
That is so true. Every second there's a new one being made and putting out there. And they may take 3 or 4 years to get fully recognized, but the more content you put out there, the better. And we have places like Bandcamp, YouTube, Spotify, where you can just put your stuff up there for free and people will be able to get it. And I think it was Radiohead that did this first with, correct me if I'm wrong, they did In Rainbows, the album In Rainbows, and they put it up on their website saying, donate the price of whatever you feel like you want to pay. If you want to pay 1 penny, or do you want to pay $10,000 to be able to do it? And then I know Amanda Palmer with the Dresden Dolls was the first person to make $1 million off a GoFundMe page because she wanted to, I believe it was, buy herself out of her contract and record an album on her own.
Right.
And it's so readily available today to do that. Back in the 70s and going into the 80s, what did you notice for bands trying to make it out of their small towns? What was the way to promote themselves?
Well, you were trapped. You only had so many things you could do. And the big thing was get out there and play. If you had to be an open for a big band, you did it. If you were number 5, you did it. If they had free concerts, you were out there playing. If you were out there playing, that's where promoters were. That's where the people that were looking for bands, they'd go to clubs. They'd go, hey, did you hear this band at so-and-so? And the promoter said, no, I never heard those. You got to hear these guys. They're just a bunch of kids, but they're really good. So back then, that's how you did it. And you were trapped. You had to go to the big studios to make it. Because they're the ones with the money.
Yeah.
There were smaller studios around, but they didn't have the money to grease the DJs to play your stuff.
That's the thing. The money that the people had to pay to get on the radio.
Yep. And once you get on the radio and people liked you and they start calling in saying, oh, I love this song. Could you play it again? That's when you knew. It was tough. But again, there was a lot of work out there. So you could always play. Only, 0.1% of the bands out of 100 ever made it. So the rest of them were all doing those everyday gigs, like I was saying, high school, college frats, the local nightclubs. Yeah. Now, different. Now it's all online. You don't need a manager anymore. You don't need to go to the big 5 to be recorded.
That's true.
You can do it yourself. I mean, wow, digitally, it's incredible what you can do with your own computer with your band.
Yep. And this is something that I love reading through the history and picking up these little pieces. A lot of people don't realize that these bands that eventually made it big, they're really super groups. A lot of people goes, oh, the super group that's existent, that so-and-so made it big and so-and-so made it big, and they made this super group. Every single band that's out there before they make it big are musicians that had played in 4 or 5 different bands that pop out there. And they've been doing it for 5, 10, 15 years before they break out. And you say, oh, well, this is their first released album. That was their first major label released album that's out there.
Right. Well, I think it's easier today to get your band out there than it was 30, 40 years ago.
That's true.
It's a lot easier today. If you've got good music, people are going to hear it. Yeah. All you need is a couple of people to hear it and start sharing. That stupid little thumbs up icon and that little share. You start sharing, it's going to go through the roof. You start going through the roof, then you start getting sponsors. You start getting sponsors and you've got it. Then you start going out and playing.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to jump backwards again with you left off with the studios. What was your next move? Like what took place after the studio went to a close? You're still a musician in South California. What was that next move for you?
This is the part that people say, oh, really? Yeah. Well, you know what? When you're a musician and you want to play, you play where you play.
Okay.
So Christian music came in really heavy in the 80s, but in the 70s, it was like a roller coaster. It was going up a hill. People were watching it. By the end of the 70s, early 80s, jobs were harder and harder to find. But now you have in Southern California, the big Jesus movement, and the churches they didn't just have a couple of hundred, they had thousands. And I went to this church one night with a couple and I didn't want to go. I said, no, I don't want to go to church, And they said, oh, you're going to like this.
Okay.
I said, no, I'm not going to like it. I'm going to hear this guy screaming about how I'm going to go to hell and demons are going to eat me. And no, it's not like that, John. So I went to this church. I won't even tell you what name it is. If anyone's from Southern California and we're talking the 70s, there were only 2 huge churches then. So, and they both came, one of them came from the other.
Oh, cool. Like the branch off. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
The population got too big and they had maybe disagreements over certain things.
Right.
Yeah.
So I went to this church and I heard this pastor talk and it was pretty cool. It was like down to earth, just talking about life and I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink. I didn't like anything to do with the drug era. And most of the people I hung with, a lot of them were drug addicts.
Yeah.
So
unfortunately.
Yeah. Great musicians, but they like their drugs.
We lost a lot that way. It's really sad.
And then there was the Jesus people on the other side that was so straight, it was sickening. So I remember going to this church and saying, do I fit in anywhere? I mean, the Jesus people are crazy, I thought at the time. I said, the drug people are crazy. I said, there's got to be somewhere I could fit in.
That in between, yeah.
Anyway, I went to this church and I liked it. Now, you have to remember this is the late 70s. So they didn't, well, it wasn't the late 70s. It was like the middle 70s. And I didn't even know the Christian realm had bands, Christian bands. They were already out there recording. There were dozens of Christian bands.
Yeah, I had a lot of gospel. I know of the gospel stuff was really big, of a lot of the individuals that were choirs or little small families that were out recording. But yeah, I wouldn't think about associating the 70s to these Christian rock bands.
Yeah, they actually had Christian rock bands in the 70s. And I had, of course, I wasn't in that realm, so I had no idea. So, well, I figured, I'm going to look into this. So the only problem was I didn't live close to the church. So it was a 40-minute drive for me to get there. And I thought, I really like this, but it's just too far. Well, it must have been a prayer answered, because I wasn't even attending this church maybe a month when they annexed a church just down the road from where I was living.
Nice.
Yeah, and I said, okay, so how can you not live with that? Okay, there's a God.
Yeah.
There's got to be. He's building me a church. So I go to this church, and the pastor of the church, this is another, okay, we're going to get on a rabbit trail here.
Go for it.
I'm playing with this guy. His name was Bill Medley. He was one of the singers to the Righteous Brothers.
Nice.
I did a gig with him. This was years before.
Okay.
And so what I mean by years is maybe a year.
Yeah.
So I did this gig with him, and I heard this name, John Wimber, at this church that I was going to, and I said, I didn't think much of it, but I'm playing with this Medley guy. And we're in the green room, and I hear the name Wimber again. And I thought, wait a minute. So I asked, is this the same John Wimber? I said that he said, yeah, he's a pastor of a church. He said
cool.
He's and I said, yeah, I've never met him, but I know he's going to be a pastor. I mean, he's one of the co-pastors, but I've never met him. And I said, how do you know him? And he said, well, he started the Righteous Brothers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I said, really? And I said, does Bill know that this guy is like a Jesus person? He said, oh, yeah, we all do. He said, John's a great guy, man. He said, you'd love him when you meet him.
There you go.
So, all right, now now let's jump forward again.
Okay.
So this the Annex Church is opening up, and glory be, John Wimber is going to be the pastor.
Sweet.
Now I've met him before that. He wanted me to come to the church. So we go to his church, and they have a full band.
Oh, yeah.
Now this is the first time I'm really seeing a full band in church. I mean, they have every instrument you can think about, and they were good.
Sweet.
And I liked it. So I met the guy that was the leader. They call him a worship leader. And we talked, and he said, how would you like to play with us? And I said, well, what about the drummer you already have? And he said he wouldn't mind. He said, we can have room for more than one drummer. And I said, great. I said, when do you want to start? He said, tonight. And this was,
wow.
Yeah, this was like
on the spot.
A Sunday night. And it was a Sunday morning we're talking. And I said, so you want me to play tonight? And he said, yeah. So I said, okay. I went home, got my red Sparkle Ludwigs, brought him up, set him up on the stage. And he said, the keyboard player likes the drummer to be right behind him. And I said, that's the Pastor John. And he said, yeah, he wants, so I set up my drums. And I remember that John came in and he looked at my set and said, red Sparkle Ludwigs, we're going to boogie tonight.
Here's the question. Are these the original ones that you got as a child?
Yeah. I still had them up to this point.
That is awesome.
But I remember when he said about, red Sparkle Ludwigs. And when he saw me, he didn't know I was going to play. And he said, how you doing? I said, fine. He said, you ready? And I said, yeah. Well, we played, and I'm looking at this guy leading, and he's crying. And I'm thinking, I'm screwing it up.
Oh, no.
I've never played Jesus music. What do I know? I've been listening to it for almost a year, but a few months anyway. After the service was over, he came up to me and he was crying, hanging on me. He said, "I have found my drummer."
Oh, that's a great compliment to hear.
And I said, "Wow." And he said, "You don't just bang, you play music." And I said, "Yeah, I've been told that before." He said, it was wonderful. So he said, "You're my drummer from now on." I said, "Okay."
So how long did you drum for him?
Oh, for him?
Yeah.
Short, because we moved 5 months later. No,
Oh,
a year
man.
later we moved out and was away from the church. But I mean, how long for that church? Because that church branched out all over the United States.
Oh, okay.
I played with that church off and on for probably 30 years.
Oh, wow.
When I came here in Atlanta, I played for almost 20 years straight.
So that one relationship created a lifelong 30-year span.
And who would ever think that I'd end up a G-zoid? You know?
You never know where Jesus is going to find you.
Yeah.
That's the neat thing. And one of my episodes in the near future is going to be speaking with one of my friends who helped kind of push me back into religion, where I had lost my kind of way. And earlier episode, I had spoke to a friend that is a minister in the Church of Christ, and it's, you never know where it's going to find you. I'm not pushing a message of Jesus out there for anyone, but it's each person has their own thing. Like,
well, I'll tell you what, Christian music, being a musician and being a secular musician are way different. Yeah, I'm a musician. I'm a drummer. I'm going to play my heart out,
Yes.
whether it's Christian music or if it's secular music. But there's a fine line when you go to a church and they call it worship and you're worshiping. If someone comes up to me after worship and said, "Oh man, you guys were hot this morning. Drums were hot." That's not a compliment. They might think it is, but to me, it's not. If they come up to me and said, "Wow, it's like I entered into worship and it was beautiful." And what I mean by that is, unlike secular music, which by the way, I love, when you're in a church and you're doing worship, you're not there to perform. And there's a real fine line between worshiping and performance. And if you cross over that line, all you are is a really great band. You're not a worship band. My church, we believe that when we're actually worshiping God with our instruments, that God can come through with our music. And we can see things that we don't normally see. And what I mean by see things, I don't mean like a ghost will appear and go, "Woo." I mean that God can reveal things in your own heart. Because I believe that's, this is another whole rabbit trail about prayer language and all this stuff. I really believe that a true musician called by God, when he's playing from his heart, that God's playing right through him. And
wow.
sometimes I can even hear God when I'm playing, and I could be haughty, look up and say, "So what'd you think of that, bud? Was that cool?" And I can hear him say, "Yeah, watch me let you drop your stick now." Ha ha. I was just kidding.
Humbling. Yeah.
But now this is another whole subject, but to be on a worship team, you just can't show up on a Sunday morning and go. You have to have relationships. I played with the same bass player for 28 years. We knew each other like a book. I mean, didn't matter what the music was. I could look at Wayne and he could look at me, and just by the way I'd move my shoulder or Wayne would turn his bass, I knew where he was going. He was up there with me. When I did a crescendo on a kettle drum or a cymbal, he was right there with his bass to just make it boom. That takes a lot of work. It's like any other band. You could take professional musicians, put them together, and they could sound like they never played their instruments.
Yeah, you really have to have that bond. It really does make a big difference.
Yeah, there's only a few people that I ever knew that could just come in and sit in and just be great with whoever they're playing. That's not normal. Most musicians, we work at it. And when you have the same people on the same team week after week or month after week, I mean, they get to know each other. They know when John came in, he had a crappy week. And that's going to affect the way he's going to play. So they're going to be with me. We're going to talk about it. We're
It's
going
a
to have
relationship.
coffee.
It's literally a relationship.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was a big war between me and the church. I used to always say, you get members that would come in and they'd say, "Well, I didn't have enough time to rehearse this week. I was out of town." Well, maybe you're not being called. You say this every week, or you say it 4 or 5 times a month. Maybe you're not being called to be on this team. They used to think, well, I would teach worship to other worship leaders, and they'd say, how do I know when someone on our team is supposed to be on our worship team? And I say, well, if they're a hot musician, that's a great thing, but that's not what the criteria. It's their heart.
Yeah. It could take away from the actual band itself if they're trying to showboat.
Well, that's exactly right. Because like I said, there's a fine line between worshiping and performing. There's churches here in Atlanta that have outrageous bands. I mean, they're just, people go just because they want to hear the Christian band play.
Okay.
But all they are is great musicians. I know because I played for half of them. And they get paid, and I never took money. And other musicians would get mad at me and say, well, you're ruining it for this. This is what we do for a living. I'd say, I can see you doing concerts and things like that and getting paid. But when you're here on Sunday mornings, how can you take money to play? I said, think about it. If this is what you're doing, and of course, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
There's musicians out there right now, Christians are not cussing me out because I wasn't taking money. Just on a Sunday, by the way. If I'm going to play on a Saturday night, you're going to pay. Oh, gosh. Now, like I said, we could talk about this for hours about how I felt, about being a Christian musician. So
you're sitting at this point, you start playing in the churches, you're continuing, still doing it to this day, playing. Was that did that transition really, for you as a musician, was that it for that transition? Or did you have anything else in the 70s, 80s, 90s that you were doing besides that music?
I've always done like little recording sessions and things like that and filled in for other drummers. Like when I go to Austin to visit my daughter, there's always a band because for some reason, and I don't know why, Austin does not have any drummers. Huh. I'm sure they have drummers, but every time I talk to a band, it's always like the drummer's like, hey, man, if you could take like a few days from me, I would love to get some time off. There's like no one. I'd say, hell yeah, of course I will, There's a little place called a Warehouse District that's in Austin, and it's full of like little jazz and blues bands. It's really nice. I can always find a gig there.
Nice.
And every huge barbecue restaurant always has live music.
It's part of the vibe.
Yeah, so I still like to play. Church, I have not played in a church for about probably 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
So to say that I really play in a church.
So you always have your kit in your car. You even have one today in your car when you pulled up.
Yeah, right. There you go. You never know, right?
So are you still active in the church?
Yeah, somewhat. There are a few churches that I fill in from time to time. They'll call me and ask me. My favorite keyboard player became a pastor. He's got a church. That's a 45 minute to an hour drive. So I've played with him a couple of times. But mainly now I'm retired. I'm kind of like laid back. So my basic music needs right now are we're trying to form a small band, and we want to do little venues around town because they are opening up again, especially if you don't charge money. People love that. They'll take you in and hire you in a second if they hire you for free.
That's true, yeah, because they're getting people that are coming in, as they say, putting butts in seats with having that band there. It's the atmosphere, it's the ambiance. And as a musician, it's getting, you hadn't been able to play for a little while with your foot that was going on. It gets you back those reps that you couldn't get before.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's nothing beats playing live in front of people. You can play in a basement all day long, but once you get in front of those people, it's a different world.
Right.
It entirely is. So that's where you currently are at as a musician currently at this day?
Yeah. I play now for my own enjoyment, not to make money or to not that I couldn't. I probably could even at my age, but right now it's just for my own enjoyment. Let's get on a little rabbit trail. Let's go back to the Wayback Machine, the first interview I did when I told you about my mom being pregnant.
Okay.
And she was in a bad car accident, and they thought I was going to be either a stillborn or born. Well, I am kind of crazy.
We all are.
But and I think if you remember correctly, in the 9th month, I started moving and I was tapping. And she said I was actually tapping a beat.
Nice rhythm, man.
Yeah, and I thought that was pretty cool that God created me to be a drummer. So why wouldn't I want to use that for the rest of my life? Of course,
Yeah.
Yes.
When you have that God-given gift, you gotta use it. And I bet you will play to the day you die. There was a musician for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I cannot remember her name. Her goal was to become the longest playing musician. And I think that week she had broke the record in the United States. There's a musician somewhere else in the world that had farther out there. She died on stage. Like she fell out.
Oh,
on
I
stage.
knew who that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't, I would love to be doing a gig and just keel over on my drums.
Yeah. An upright bass player. That's what she was.
Okay, this is going to be weird for your listeners, but I had someone come up to me and said they had a dream that I was in my 90s. There were two young people in the back of this venue, and they were saying, can you believe it? Next week, the old guy's going to be here playing drums. And he said, oh, we're going to be gone. He said, you got to be kidding. You got to tell your parents you're going to stay home. You can stay with us. He said, you can't miss the old guy. He said, the old guy's going to be playing. And this person's, and I didn't know he was talking about me. He's just talking about
just a dream he had.
A dream.
Yeah.
And he said, next week comes and they start to play. And then this old guy walks just kind of, he wasn't like crawling, but he just slowly walked up and sat behind the drums and said, let's get it done. And they just started playing and it was great. And he said, John, it was you. I saw your face in that dream.
Holy moly. That's super cool.
Well, yeah, considering that I'm on borrowed time right now because no one lives in my family over 70. My sister just passed away this October and she was only 64.
Oh, man.
So my brother passed at 62. I do have a brother who's 74, but he's alive because he's mean.
Okay.
Not really. He's a great guy, but I always say that. That's why he's still alive.
Older brother or younger brother?
Older.
So yeah.
So actually, yeah. And
it's your role as the younger sibling.
Yeah, and I think I'm just still alive because I'm dumb and I'm already supposed to be dead, but I don't know that.
So we're winding down here, going through our whole conversation and being on part 2. This has been a phenomenal conversation, and I hope that you listeners have enjoyed this. So John, if you could go back into time. You've had this long career since 1950 up to current day. Could you go back and change anything? Would you do it? Or would you say, hey, I live it again and it'd be just fine?
I think a little of both, especially if I could go back with the memories I have now. Yeah, what I would do, you remember the lounge incident where that piano
the drum
player?
Machine, boom, boom.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I would hunt down the engineer who invented that, take a sledgehammer and beat all his equipment to just little pieces of plastic and metal. Then I would turn to the engineer who invented all this and the Italian in me. I would whisper in his ear, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
Ooh.
And that's how I'm going to end that because the box will never come out. Now we know in real life, someone else is going to invent it.
That's true.
And then a couple of years down the line, you're going to get DJs. And what am I going to do? Break every record I can see and beat up all the DJs? It's not going to happen. So I think I could have handled it better. I think I should have put more pressure. No, a lot more pressure on Musicians Union because they did nothing to help us. Zero. Not that they could because this is a land of opportunity.
True.
And you can't say this person can't do it, this person can, but they never helped us. Never, at least me, they never helped.
So really those bigger bands were not really affected, but those smaller local individuals were kind of cut off, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was more like 99% 999 of all musicians were slowly cut off. Like I said, it didn't happen overnight. It was like a cancer. It grew. And I saw it from day one, and I'm sure other musicians had seen it. But yeah, it slowly closed all the doors for local bands to get out and to show what they had to do. If you weren't one of the few bands that could open for a big band, you were probably never going to get shown because clubs slowly all turn into DJs, disco. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to go there. It makes me want to throw up. But again, it passed on. The internet came, and then, like we talked about, YouTube, and it opened up a whole brand new venue. So now there's no excuse for a band, local or anything else, not to be able to make it with today's incredible electronics.
Yeah, it is insane thinking about the 1920s with a single channel sitting back with a microphone held up to someone's guitar, going into the 30s and 40s where you start seeing the multi-track with Les Paul introducing, where you're having these different layers that are popping up. Then you see the 16 channel board, the 24 channel board, and now you can sit back and this giant massive boards that used to be in rooms are now on your laptop, and you can sit back and do the whole thing remotely on your computer.
For free.
Yeah, for free. Or you can pay a little more and get some of these bigger softwares if you want to expand on. And I'm not saying that the recording studios don't have a purpose at all. They are vitally important to keeping the music industry growing. But really, in order to get yourself out there, you don't need to really be in those studios yet. You may get there eventually, but it's not a requirement to be visually seen by those managers that you had saying that we're scouting these individuals out. They can be able to find you from their home.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there any other things that perhaps last minute thoughts or stuff that you want to kind of add on as we are kind of here at the end?
Yeah. I think I was born, like my dad said, either 20 years late, should have been in the big band era, or or maybe 50 years too soon. Maybe I should have been born and been a teenager now, because I think it would have been totally different for me. I grew up in a really hard time being a drummer. It just, no one saw it coming. It just came and I had to deal with it.
Yeah, that's true. But with all parts of life, you adapt, you move on, and you still have those memories, good or bad, that are held behind. Because if you didn't do it at all, who knows where you'd be now if you never picked up a set of drumsticks.
Yeah.
That's true.
Absolutely. I mean, I had a lot of great times. If I think about it, I had better times than not.
There you go.
So, and I'm happy I even got to be part of it.
And that's what matters the most. That is what matters the most there. Now, with that said, John, we've done 2-part episode here. It's been amazing. I've learned a lot from you and continue to learn a lot from you every time we sit down and talk. So I recommend to listeners, I think I say this almost every time, and it's the truth. It keeps piling it on. It doesn't matter if someone is 2 years old when they start talking, all the way up to 100 years old and on. Sit down, talk to them, learn something, ask them a question. You never know what you're going to get, because I definitely I've known you for close to 20 years now, and 90% of this stuff I had no clue. And once you start talking, asking questions, it leads down a rabbit trail of what's more to be out there. And I look forward to kind of what's to come. And maybe in the near future, we can sit down and I'll bring the bass. I have a friend that'll bring guitar, and we can sit back and play some music and kind of see where it goes. So, John, thank you.
Well, it was my pleasure. Yeah. And anytime you want to get together, I'm ready.
Let's do it. With that being said, remember, listeners, to like, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, because this is how we continue to grow and learning from friends. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide. And most of all, as you leave today, don't forget to let your curiosity fly high.